All right, with the last set of empires, we're going to be dealing with the Asian empires. And we have a lot going on here because it's a really, really big area. So again, here with the Asian empires, and make sure you're highlighting what I'm highlighting, the Asian empires were regional, not global. In fact, this is a really key point. So again, just like we've done before, you want to make sure you put a star right here by the unlabeled sentence, because again, it sets itself apart from what, for example, the Europeans are doing. Because these empires are regional and not global, the creation of the empires did not include massive epidemics. These are people that they're conquering, that they have had contact with for quite some time. Again, they are their next door neighbors. They are not isolated next door neighbors, unlike the Siberians. These are people that they have interacted with, so they've shared germs. So when they come into the area and conquer them, and a lot of times what they're just doing is they already have some type of pre-existing relationship with the people that they'll eventually conquer. They're just simply changing the terms and conditions of that relationship. Because these are people also that they've had contact with long term, it does not fundamentally transform their homelands like the interaction with Americas and Siberia did with the European powers. Because the Europeans and also the Russians going to Siberia are going to someplace completely and totally new that they had no real contact, or they had no contact with, I should say. Prior to this, not only are the conquerors imposing a lot of change on the conquerees, but as a result of that interaction, the conquerors are also being changed themselves. And we don't see that with any of these Asian empires. So the first empire, we've dealt with this a little bit already, is the dynasty within China. Here we have a new dynasty. Rather than the Ming dynasty, we now have the Qin dynasty that again is going to last for the rest of the imperial period within China. And here with the Qin dynasty, they're going to launch enormous imperial expansion to the north and the west. And again, the nomads in the north and the west were very familiar to the Chinese. So again, nothing necessarily new here. But this is not going to be an overnight type of conquest. In fact, it's going to be 80 long years of the Chinese attempting to conquer these nomads. And again, just like the Russians in the grassy steppe region, the Chinese are going to be motivated by security fears. These guys are concerned that, it'll almost kind of be like a second coming of the Mongols. With this expansion, China is going to evolve into a Central Asian empire. We're not just hugging the coast. We're not just concentrating only within the eastern part of Asia, but we're expanding to the west here as well. And there are a couple unique things here with the Chinese empire that are being created. One, the conquered territory is ruled separately from the rest of China through the court of colonial affairs. So unlike with the Europeans and unlike with the Russians who tried to absorb these conquered people into either European or Russian culture, the Chinese want to keep them at a distance. Again, we've talked about this a little bit before, that the Chinese are very xenophobic. They're very leery of foreigners and foreign ways. It's one of the main reasons when the Ming comes in, they want to get rid of every remnant of the Mongolian dynasty that came before the Ming dynasty. And they're still kind of carrying that vibe on with the conquering of these other territories. Again, keeping those foreigners at a distance. And there are some big things here. One, they do use kind of in-house elites to govern. These officials are going to imitate Chinese ways, but, the government really did not even try to assimilate the conquered peoples. And there's also little Chinese settlement in the conquered areas. So guys, you want to put here, put 2 stars, put one by C and one by D, and then go ahead and do one of the little carrots again. One of these bad boys, and then we're going to have a note that goes at the end of it. So the little note I want you to put here right at the end of the carrot, you want to put here, this is substantially different This is substantially different from Europe. This is substantially different from Europe. To the south and the west of the Chinese Empire, we have the next Asian empire, which is going to be based in India. And this is going to be the Mughal Empire. And this is going to be an empire that, just like the Qin in China, are going to hang around for quite some time. Now, it's going to take them a little bit of time in order to create their empire. And we're going to, once they do unite much of India during this time period, they really will end up moving forward and become a really important, especially commercial trade area, especially with items going to the West and Western Europe. And India will become very, very much sought after. But with the Mughal Empire, the most important divide here is going to be religious. And we talked a little bit about this in the last chapter. The Mughals are an Islamic empire, and they're coming in and they're trying to govern over a region that is almost uniformly Hindu. So they're in a unique position that a religious minority is trying to govern over a religious majority. And you'll see that there's going to be some eras where everything is gravy and fantastic, and there's going to be others where it is not going to be so. In fact, ultimately here, this religious divide is going to cause a breakup of colonial India once they free themselves from English rule right after World War II, and it will break up into Hindu-based India, and what had been the northern part of colonial India will actually break apart into Islamic Pakistan. The most important of these emperors is going to be Akbar, who really attempts some serious accommodation of the Hindu majority. He really goes in and tries to accommodate and blend together these two vastly different religious groups. He brings a lot of Hindus into the political military elite, where before again, kind of similar to what China had done in the aftermath of the Mongolian dynasty, where the Chinese reserved only the top positions within government and the military for fellow Chinese. For a long time, that was the same within the Mughal Empire, that you could only be part of the political military elite if you were also a fellow Muslim. But Akbar is going to try to break that down a little bit here as well. He's also going to impose a policy of toleration. He's really trying to find a middle ground between Islam and Hinduism. So what he ultimately ends up doing is he creates this fantastic state cult that stress loyalty to the emperor. And it's going to be important for us to get down. You want to put the note here next to D underneath number 3. And again, I don't care which side that you want to go to, but this is going to be a pretty important note. So you also want to make sure that you put a star by the note as well. So creating this state cult is really smart of Akbar. And the note I want you to put down here is, by centering everything around the emperor, by centering everything around the emperor, not only can this ease religious tensions, not only can this ease religious tensions, but also increase his power as well. But also increase his power as well. So if he creates this cult that's almost more making the Mughal Empire more like a team sport, where everybody within this empire can participate in this cult regardless of whether at base you're a Muslim or a Hindu, then it kind of, brings everybody together. It's a great uniting factor. But if it also has him, a political leader, as the center of that religious cult, it's just going to take his power and just simply shoot it off to the moon. So this is really a great idea for him and he gets huge benefits from it. Not only does he chill out the situation within his empire, but he also makes himself not only a political figure, but also a religious figure as well. Unfortunately here, all of his toleration will eventually provoke some reaction among some Muslims, especially some hardline Muslims. So one of his successors, Aurangzeb, will actually reverse the Mughal policy of toleration and impose or reimpose, depending on how you want to look at it, Islamic supremacy. So a lot of the chilled out, hey, let's find a middle ground between ourselves and the Hindus is just simply gone. Now it's the Islamic way or the highway. And a lot of the policies, such as allowing the practice of sati, widow burning, is also going to be banned, as well as, some other aspects of the toleration that had started with Akbar. And just like Akbar's toleration provoked reaction among some hardline Muslims, Aurangzeb's policy is also going to provoke some Hindu reaction as well. Guys, you want to put down here next to 5 because this really is going to be kind of a constant thing here. So again, don't care which side it's on, but you want to put down here next to 5 underneath capital B that tensions between Muslims and Hindus, tensions between Muslims and Hindus were a major source of internal division, which helped the Europeans later. The Europeans are really, really great at, once they come in with colonialism or later on in the 19th century with imperialism, to do the whole divide and conquer thing. Well, with the Mughal Empire, the population is already divided. So when the Europeans come in, whether it's the Dutch, the French, or the English, they're able to play off of those divisions, and they don't necessarily find it a great effort to kind of inch away at the imperial strongholds that the Mughals have. So the last of the Asian empires is another Islamic empire with the Ottoman Empire. And again, this is going to be one who even longer than the Mughals will be dealing with, or at least will kind of be mentioning. So again, some of this we've already talked a little bit about before. But again, make sure you're highlighting what I'm highlighting. The Ottoman Empire was Islamic world's most important empire in the early modern period. I mean, this is also going to be one of the longest empires. I mean, this sucker lasts for more than 500 years. And is a threat not only in its growth of power, but it's also going to have a weird relationship with Europe in its very long period of decline with power. But that's another story that we'll have to deal with as well here a little bit later. These guys at this point are dealing with some long conflicts between the Sunni Ottomans and the Shia Safavids that we talked about before. The Ottoman Empire was also a site of significant cross-cultural encounters. What this does for them, at least as long as we are still using the land trade routes, and you want to put this down here next to 3, it's just a little note. But you want to put, please, here, that this brings about a lot of wealth. Pretty much if you look at the location of the Ottoman Empire, goods coming from the east going to the west have to traipse through the Ottoman Empire. People coming from the west going to the east have to traipse through the Ottoman Empire. Trade routes coming up from Africa are going to go through the Ottoman Empire. So as long as these overland trade routes are still healthy, the Ottoman Empire is going to be a financial boom and is going to be politically very healthy, because there's usually this double-headed dragon in history that if you have a bad economic situation, then you have a bad political situation. If you have a bad political situation, then you're going to have a bad economic situation, and we'll see that tons. Now, the problem for the Ottoman Empire is going to come once we start to shift more and more to maritime trade via ships and the ocean. Ultimately, the final nail in the coffin is going to be the digging of the Suez Canal. Because before then, in order for you to sail to the east, you have to go around Africa in through the Indian Ocean, and it ends up taking a lot of time. We create steamships, it cuts down the time, but still overland trade is still occurring. Well, when we're able to, via the Suez Canal, take a shortcut through the Mediterranean and not have to worry about going through or going around Africa, you can just go through a canal, all of a sudden the overland trade within the Ottoman Empire is going to bottom out, and that causes economic problems. And like I said, economic problems end up causing political problems. Now, just like all of the other Islamic empires, the Islamic empires, for the most part, and for most of their history, are going to be really chilled out, especially to non-Muslims. Pretty much all you have to do is not cause any problems, pay the I'm not a Muslim tax. The Mongols did this, and several others, including the Ottomans, will do this as well. And you can pretty much go about your business. So the Ottoman Empire, because of its location, because of its size, because of the economic opportunities going on there, there's a lot of non-Muslims coming in. There's a large Jewish population. There's a very large Christian population, especially in the Balkans, which is the southeastern part of Europe. The Balkan Peninsula is going to be where like Yugoslavia had been, where Serbia is. It's going to be an area where there's going to be a lot of different groups of people, because the Mongolians will have come that far to the west. So there's a Muslim population there and now as well. But in the Balkans, many Christians are going to welcome the Ottoman conquest, because again, they're really fairly chilled out rulers. The Ottomans tax less and were less oppressive. Christian churches are going to receive considerable autonomy. So again, the Christian churches, provided that they don't cause the Ottomans any problems, are able to continue to do whatever it is that they're doing. You also have the Balkan elites being accepted within the Ottoman elites without any conversion. So you have these noblemen in these areas that are still able to retain their noble status and their importance and still remain Christians. Like, they don't have to convert to Islam in order to retain that status. Again, these guys are really, really fairly chilled out. You also have a large refugee population coming in, especially the Jewish refugees coming in from Spain after the Reconquista that Ferdinand and Isabella are going to do. Now, the only kind of strange thing is something known as the Devshirme, which is the tribute of boys paid by Balkan Christian communities, or Christian Balkan communities. These guys are also known as something else, and you want to put down here next to number 6, and I'll spell what needs to be spelled. Do you want to put down that these are also known as, aka, the Jansenaries, and that's Jansinaries. Jansinaries. Now, even though these guys are relatively chilled out, the Ottoman state is still going to be seen as a threat to Christendom. And you want to put down here next to number 7 that the Europeans worried about a Muslim takeover of all Europe. The Europeans worried about a Muslim takeover of all Europe. However, this will decline as the Ottomans decline. However, this will decline as the Ottomans decline. Now, granted, the Ottoman decline will create a new series of problems, but their threat as, in regards to Christendom will end up, kind of going by the wayside. So one of the things that the author of your textbook likes to do, and I told you this, I think, with the last chapter, is he really likes to reflect on some larger themes or some larger ideas that kind of encompass the chapter that we've just done. And this is kind of looking at putting things within, or putting regional items within a larger context. And what he's sort of kind of talking about here is putting European empire building within the context of the other empire building that's going on globally within the same time. So comparing to what the Europeans are doing, to what the Russians are doing, to what the Chinese are doing, to what the Ottomans, to what the Mughals are doing. And it does a couple things. One, European colonization on the Americas takes on different meanings when it's compared to other empire building projects. The one big one here is that it helps to counter Eurocentrism. And I want to define that for you. So you want to go ahead and underline Eurocentrism. And just draw a little arrow, and we're going to put the definition right here next to number 1. And the definition for Eurocentrism is the glorification of Europe, and all things European. The glorification of Europe and all things European. Also, by comparing the European building and then also everybody else's building, allows us to see more clearly the distinctive features of the European empire. And two things I really want to point out here, and just you can go ahead and just put them right underneath number 2. You have this space here. Do you want to put out two things? One, the first one is they were something new in human history. They were something new in human history. Maybe not necessarily new, but something kind of different, a deviation from the norm. Because empire building up to this point had been all about going in and beating the living crap out of your next door neighbors. And all the other empire building that is going on at this time is doing just that. But the Europeans can't do that. They have to go across an entire ocean and have a holy crap, look what we found type of moment in order for them to build their empire, to build their colonies. The second note I want you to get down, and again, we're still underneath number 2 here. Do you want to put, please, here, that they had a much greater impact. They had a much greater impact on the people they incorporated. They had a much bigger impact on the people they incorporated. Again, a lot of this has to do with the fact that these are people that the Europeans had never come into contact with before. Where everyone else is expanding into their next door neighbors, they've had some contact with them before. They already have a relationship with. Now they're changing the terms and conditions of that relationship, but there isn't this obsession, by and large, with the exception of the Russians, to forcibly alter the way of life of the people that they are conquering.